In October 2015, a Wall Street Journal investigative reporter named John Carreyrou published a story that no one in Silicon Valley wanted to believe. The story was simple. A company valued at $9 billion, one of the most celebrated health technology startups in American history, could not actually do what it claimed to do. Its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, was 31 years old. She had dropped out of Stanford at 19. She had raised $700 million from some of the most powerful people in the world. And almost none of it was real. This is not a story about ambition. Ambition is everywhere. This is a story about what happens when a company decides that the gap between where it is and where it claims to be is a problem that tomorrow can fix, and tomorrow never comes. To understand the fraud, you have to understand the promise, because the promise was genuinely extraordinary. Holmes founded Theranos in 2003, age 19, with a single obsession. She was terrified of needles. She believed that if you could run a full panel of blood tests from a single finger prick, just a few drops, you could transform healthcare, early detection. Cheap diagnostics, a test that any person anywhere could afford. The pitch was compelling because the problem it solved was real. In the United States, a standard blood panel could cost hundreds of dollars. Millions of Americans avoided testing because they couldn't pay or because they feared the needle. Holmes was offering something that sounded like pure democratization. Medicine, accessible to everyone. By 2013, the board of directors included George Shultz, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, two former US Secretaries of Defense, a retired general and a retired admiral. These were not technology people, they were people who understood power and reputation, and Holmes had collected them like chess pieces. Walgreens signed a partnership to install Theranos wellness centers in its pharmacies across America. Safeway invested $350 million to build out dedicated health clinics for the Theranos device. By 2014, Forbes named Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in American history. Her net worth was estimated at $4.5 billion. She appeared on the covers of Fortune, Time, and Inc. She wore the same black turtleneck every day, a deliberate echo of Steve Jobs. The media called her the female Steve Jobs without irony. The device at the center of this empire was called Edison. It was supposed to run up to 200 blood tests from a single drop of blood, faster and cheaper than any existing laboratory. The problem was that Edison didn't work. This is where business forensics becomes uncomfortable, because the mistake was not a single bad decision. It was a cascading architecture of deception, each layer making the next one harder to escape. The first layer was the capability gap. By 2013, Theranos could reliably run only a small fraction of the tests it advertised. For the rest, for the majority of tests that patients actually needed, the company was secretly using conventional Siemens laboratory equipment and conventional blood draws, then passing the results off as if they came from Edison. Patients at Walgreens were being told their blood results came from a revolutionary finger prick device. In reality, a standard venous draw was being diluted and run through a commercial lab machine, a process that introduced significant error rates. The error rates mattered because these were medical results. Patients received false positives for HIV, false cancer markers, incorrect thyroid readings that led doctors to change medications. One patient received a result suggesting she might miscarry, which her doctor later determined was almost certainly a Theranos error. The second layer of the mistake was what Holmes and her co-conspirator, President Ramesh Sunny Balwani, did when confronted with the problem internally. Employees who raised concerns were fired or silenced. Tyler Shultz, grandson of board member George Shultz, left the company and attempted to report concerns to California regulators. Holmes confronted him personally. Theranos sent lawyers after him. His grandfather, rather than investigate, initially sided with the company. Theranos hired the law firm Boies Schiller, one of the most aggressive litigation firms in America, not primarily to defend legitimate legal interests, but as a suppression mechanism. Former employees were bound by non-disclosure agreements so broad that they feared speaking even to regulators. The third layer was investor deception. The $700 million raised from investors including Rupert Murdoch, the DeVos family, the Walton family, and various media moguls was done without providing standard financial disclosures. Holmes allegedly told investors the company had $100 million in revenue when actual revenue was closer to $100,000, a ratio of 1,000 to 1. This is the mistake, not the technology failing. Technology fails all the time. The mistake was the decision repeated over a decade, to keep going anyway, to raise more money, to put more patients through unreliable tests, to deploy more lawyers against more whistleblowers. By 2015, Theranos had processed blood tests for hundreds of thousands of patients across Arizona and California. The fall began with a single source. John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal had been tipped off by a former Theranos employee. He spent months trying to verify claims that seemed almost impossible to believe, that a company this celebrated, this funded, this connected, could be running on such fundamental dishonesty. Holmes gave a public interview, dismissing his inquiry as the work of a tabloid. Her PR machine was formidable. Her connections ran to the highest levels of US government. For a brief moment, it looked like Theranos might survive the story. It didn't. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted an inspection of the Theranos Newark, California laboratory. In January 2016, CMS issued a letter citing immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. This was the regulatory equivalent of a detonation. In July 2016, CMS banned Holmes from operating any clinical laboratory for 2 years and revoked Theranos' laboratory certification. Walgreens terminated its partnership and sued Theranos for $140 million. Safeway terminated its deal. The $350 million build-out was a total write-off. The $9 billion valuation collapsed to zero. Holmes's personal net worth, once estimated at $4.5 billion, went to zero. In June 2018, the Department of Justice indicted Holmes and Balwani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy. The SEC filed a parallel civil complaint. Holmes's trial began in August 2021. She deployed a defense that shocked observers. She claimed Balwani had psychologically abused her throughout their relationship and that this abuse impaired her decision-making. In January 2022, in November 2022, she was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She reported to prison in May 2023. Balwani was convicted on all 12 counts in July 2022, including patient fraud, and sentenced to nearly 13 years. Patients are still living with the consequences of incorrect diagnoses. The full medical impact has never been comprehensively studied. So what is the autopsy finding? What is the specific pathology that killed this company and that you can learn to recognize before it kills yours? The mental model is this: narrative-reality gap management. Every company has a gap between its current reality and the story it tells the world. That gap is necessary and normal. You raise capital for what you're building, not what you've built. You hire people with a vision that doesn't yet exist. You pitch customers on outcomes still in progress. The gap is not the problem. The management of the gap is where companies live or die. Theranos made a specific error that is invisible until it's catastrophic. They optimized for closing the gap through narrative acceleration rather than reality acceleration. Every time they couldn't make the technology work, they didn't slow down the story. They accelerated it. More investor calls, more board members, more press profiles, more pharmacy partnerships. This is structurally different from ordinary fraud. Holmes almost certainly believed at the beginning that the technology would catch up. That is how all narrative gaps start. The crime is in the moment you know the gap is permanent and you keep accelerating the narrative anyway. Watch for this in companies you evaluate, companies you join, and most importantly, companies you build. The signals are consistent. Leadership deflects technical questions with vision language. Whistleblower exits are explained as cultural mismatches. Customer pilots are extended indefinitely without converting to revenue. Investors are shown models, not actuals. The gap between what a company says and what it does is always visible to someone on the inside. The forensic question is always the same. Who knew? When did they know it? And what did the organization do to them when they spoke? In Theranos' case, those answers were devastating. $9 billion in paper value, $700 million in investor capital, hundreds of thousands of patients tested, 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. The evidence was always there. It usually is. Every failure leaves evidence. We examine it. If this breakdown was useful, subscribe. A new case drops every week.